Hi everybody. Give us an old one in the chat if you can hear me, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining me, and I appreciate it. So I'm just going to have a cozy stream, cozy ramble tonight of a few points I want to kind of get to. Wolfhound says it's quiet. It's all quiet. Well, it is quite late. My streams have been getting progressively kind of more late. I don't know why. Sometimes it's because other people are on. You might have like 2 or 3 big Irish YouTube accounts streaming. So I think, what's the point? I'll wait. And I'm kind of, cozy bedtime kind of stream anyway, works for me. It usually tends to grow as we go on a little bit. Hopefully, will again tonight. So anyway, yeah, I'm assuming you can all hear me all good. And that's a 1 in the chat if you can hear me, or a hello, any kind of indication. So let me see. Tom Kelly is saying I don't get up until 1. That'd be pretty worrying now if you knew my wake up time, whether it was 1, 5, 6, 2 a.m., 2 p.m. But certainly not 1 o'clock anyway. So I have a few things I want to get onto. I'll share my screen while we're at it. Okay, so actually, I'm going to give you a little intro first, just to kind of keep it structured. So that's just, I have a story there about Tory Island, which I just find kind of interesting. I then just want to talk about some of the quick stories about coronavirus, the pandemic in Ireland. It's not a big deep dive or anything. It's like a couple of minutes, just in case people think I'm going to dive right into it. I'm not. It's just a little, it's not directly about it. It's just some thoughts around some particular stories about that. Then I want to talk about the racist origins, so to speak, of the Tiananmen Square protests in China from back in the 80s. Just an interesting little tidbit I've stumbled across, a little factoid, or a little story, and I want to go through it. And a lot of these I haven't actually delved into deeply already myself, so I'll be kind of going through it with you. It's kind of usually how I do things, a little bit lazy. Then I want to talk about how the farm sector in Ireland wants to bring in, I'll just give you the what do you call it? I'll give you the scoop on that right now. It's just that the farming sector want to bring in 1,500 seasonal workers to pick fruit and veg. So I have my thoughts on that, obviously. Some other stuff to do. Yeah, some other general stuff there. And then I want to talk about, even though I don't know the details on it very well, but I want to explore it with you, a guy called Kyle Larson. He's a NASCAR driver who got in trouble in the last few days for doing a racism or doing some kind of faux pas of some description. And so that will be that basically, and we'll see where we go from there. So let me get started on the screen share. So today, this just actually someone just sent me this 2 minutes before I went live, because they know I like Tory Island. It is the island, Irish island, most distant from the mainland. I think it's the most distant inhabited island, probably, from the mainland. It's an incredible place if you ever get a chance to go there. I was there last year. I spent like a week there, just took an Airbnb out, or whatever it was, just someone's cottage or house. They were renting out a room in a house. Nice fireplace, the whole lot. And it's just a beautiful, absolutely amazing place. And I'm well traveled in Ireland. I like my Irish breaks away. But there's nothing I've visited quite like Tory Island. It's taking things to a whole other extreme altogether in terms of secludedness and all of that, so that's Tory. But the news they have as of now is they asked tourists not to attend the island. They basically went into complete self-isolation, I suppose, self-quarantine, and asked tourists not to visit. I don't know if they would have been legally entitled to stop them or not. But anyway, they've asked for it and whatever, that's kind of that. But this yacht pulled up. So again, I only learned of this a few minutes before I went live. The yacht and its 4-person crew berthed at the remote island. And basically the islanders, long story short, is the islanders were like, nope, you're not disembarking here. So the Coast Guard had to come out and all of them. Well, actually, it's worth. Why don't I just read it and find out what actually happened? So they were surprised when the Islanders were. Islanders were surprised when the yacht burst. She said the crew, which was Irish, told the Irish Coast Guard they travelled from Greencastle in Inishowen and were heading for Bunbeg. So they got caught in a tide, or they couldn't get land because of a certain tide. I don't really know boat stuff, to be honest with you. Something like that. The crew assured the Coast Guard that they were disinfecting all equipment and remained on the yacht overnight before leaving on Sunday. Missy Clairvale said Islanders were coming to terms with their self-imposed isolation, but were pleased that tourists were respecting their request to stay away. No reports of the pandemic, the issue on Tory so far. But Tory's an incredible place. You have you just have this one main street, a couple of one shop. You would expect all that, and then you have just sheep wandering around everywhere. I hope I'm not ratting on anybody here, but nobody has a license on the car or whatever. It's just whatever. There is one of the nicest things I found when I got there and met the owner of the house and had a good chat with him and everything. It was actually the owner's brother, but when he was leaving, we were he kind of came in to just say, hey, here's the toilet, here's the bathroom, here's the bedroom. And as he was leaving, the natural thing I am as a city person thought was just and the key. Where's the key? Did you leave it somewhere? Is it in a drawer? Is it in the lock somewhere? And he was just like, you don't need a key. And it's such a refreshing feeling, that extremely refreshing feeling. And just everybody knows you. For example, the next day I went down to the shop to get some breakfast supplies, and started chatting to the shopkeeper, the lady in the shop, a lady just outside, and said, just making conversation, said, oh, we arrived yesterday, and she was like, I know, as if it was like, we all know, because we were early in the tourist season, so we were the only people who would come. So you very much, you would be aware of who comes on and off the island. It's just funny, and it wasn't in a weird way, it was in a nice way. The island, you can traverse the whole thing. Wildlife everywhere, rabbits absolutely everywhere, sheep everywhere, all sorts of things. Puffins visit the island. I didn't see any. It's just an amazing place. But so that is basically. Chopper says proper community. It is a proper community. And what's that whole thing of the flickering windows, or that whole what's that Irish story again about the valley, the whole idea of paranoia and everybody, the twitching windows, twitching curtains, and all that. But I don't think that's as much of a problem there, really. People are spaced out a little bit from each other. It's a small island, but they still have enough space, and it seems like heaven, to be honest. And they have a lovely school, so probably a lot of government money coming in there in various ways. So they have a great school, and apparently their population is naturally growing as well. And now I can't remember where I heard that, so take it with a pinch of salt. But from what I remember, someone told me that they're actually their birth rate, or their fertility rate, basically is above replacement, which is just a strange thing for an island. You expect it to just be the old people left and everybody else is gone or whatever, but no, people are having several children, and they're not just there to be exported. They have a proper school, they have a proper lifestyle, and all of that of their own little way. It's very nice, really, really lovely place. And I'm sure they depend on the tourist season a lot. So anybody who fancies going there, I would highly recommend it. Someone just says to hit the like button, smash like. Yeah, do. It's right there. It doesn't cost anything, and it's easy enough. I'm going to like it myself. There we go. So that was just a little funny little story. I can just imagine the controversy that was going around locally when this yacht decides to land, So we have social distancing may be needed intermittently into 2022, research suggests. Again, I feel like there's a lot of clickbait going around at the moment from these newspapers and stuff, that kind of make you angry or make you whatever, make you kind of make you click, basically. certain global body kind of half says that measures may need to be kept in place, some measures into the X amount of time, and what they will say like is lockdown needs to continue until 2060, and it's like probably not really. Like they're talking about piecemeal aspects of it, and of course, talking about how like we would have these kind of, what do they call it, the second spike or whatever, and then also that it would become kind of seasonal like a flu. And I don't know, we'll have to grapple with that. But again, just as you are, I'm a little bit slightly bored of just hashing over this pandemic thing, for better or worse. I did find interesting was Fergal Bowers. He is chief regime communications artist for the RTE, yeah, so state media, just like Xinhua News or RT or whatever. He's the guy. Emmanuel Godson is here. We have an artist. We have an artist in the house. That's good. Getting things a bit cultured around here. That's nice. So Fergal Bauer says a senior World Health Organization figure has said that facial protection is going to become the norm in the wake of the coronavirus outbreak. Now, it's just been really annoying all this time, knowing that a face mask is obviously beneficial, or mass use of face masks is of a benefit to the entire population and individuals. And being told not to believe your lying brain, you don't need to actually be a scientist. Like you don't need to be a scientist to know that has some benefit. Even a mask that's not N95 is like, doesn't protect you fully from anything, but it's kind of just common sense. It's kind of just like, I know that this isn't going to stop all droplets going into my passageways. But I do think in general that so long as you had clean hands, if you walked around the place like that, as opposed to just out in the open or in the supermarket or something, a child could tell you that, well, that might stop some of it, or kind of add a barrier, not an impermeable one, but some kind of barrier, a little extra layer of reducing the chance of droplets and spread. And slowly they're just starting to admit that. There were studies all along that said, yeah, the masks are effective and all sorts of evidence. And now it's just the idea that World Health Organization are changing to say, like, you don't need masks, don't worry, don't try to get masks. And they've switched from that to, masks might be the norm now, we might need to make that the masks only work for doctors and nurses. That's not the case. I'm not going to try to defend that in detail, because I'm not, I don't have the expertise for that, and I haven't done the 10 minutes reading up on it that would bring me up to speed in detail. But it's like you have countries that instituted mass mask usage in Asia and all of that. If you look at the graph of various different countries, the countries that did remarkably better, one of their key policies, or at least cultures, was that most people wear a mask. It also, it's not so much about stopping you from getting it, but it's better at stopping you from transmitting it to other people. And on a mass level, if everybody's doing that, then that reduces spread, obviously. But what's interesting me is, I just think it's basically a fact that masks are of some benefit, of some significant benefit when used en masse. And but what's getting me isn't so much the World Health Organization coming around to admit that. I kind of knew they would have to do that eventually. It's just the seamlessness with which people like Fergal Bowers can just kind of switch from rehashing the kind of WHO line, the HSE line, and admonishing anybody else who says anything different, no matter what evidence that person has, just admonishing people, chastising them for it. And then the next day, if the said institution, the HSE or the WHO, just does a complete 180 and says, actually it's the opposite, Fergal Bowers will just come out and report that. And I suppose, logically speaking, if you were to take the opposite to what he says the second time, he would also call you a fake news spreader and all of that. But at no point do they hold their hands up and go, yeah, I was completely wrong. And the important question stemming from that is, well, why were you wrong? Is because your one source was the HSE. Your sources are this long: HSE, WHO. Now, if they're telling the truth about something, then great. You're communicating their message for them to us, and that's great because it's a true message. But if what they're saying is untrue, what methods are these people like Fergal Bowers and all of the others using to vet those institutions? What most people think of journalism as is the layer that tries to hold those institutions to account and is actually skeptical of the press releases they're given from those organizations and picks through them and verifies how true or untrue they are, maybe on our behalf for us as a favor, because we might not have the time or the kind of wherewithal. It's their job to say, hey, we'll pick through all the noise for you and tell you if what this HSE is saying is true. But it's the direct opposite. They will come down on people who question it. And masks is just the perfect example. It's like one day it's like evil and wrong and irresponsible and fake news and WhatsApp to say a mask would probably, on balance, be a good idea for people to be wearing. It goes from that to, oh, we all need to wear masks now. And there's no thing of him saying, I totally got this wrong. There were a lot of people on WhatsApp saying it. So credit to a bit of, organic rumor spreading. To be fair, it's good we have it because, to be fair, I was just taking WHO and HSE hook, line, and sinker. So there's no humility in that sense ever. It's just switch the line and whatever. The arrogance of it is what gets me. And again, the story with masks was like the kind of excuses that, well, healthcare services needed masks more than the public, which, yeah, that's true. So they needed to spin a lie in order to prevent this mass buying up of masks. I have to stop saying mass and en masse and masks at the same time because I can barely speak with it. But to stop these masks being bought up in a widespread fashion. And it's like, yeah, that's a noble lie for that. But realistically, the question would be, just admit that we need masks. And if we don't have enough, just say, look, we don't have enough. But masks would be good. They're not essential, but they'd be good. We don't have enough, hands in the air, fine. Then at least the public can hold the government to account and say, okay, that's fine. You didn't have masks, right? You're not magicians. You didn't expect every kind of eventuality. That's fine. But now we want you to get masks. We want you to be in a process of trying as quickly as you can to either produce or procure masks for all, basically, right? And that's the problem, is that's how a kind of institutional and governmental lies start. Why would they lie about masks? Why would they lie about the healthcare? Because people say, well, because healthcare workers needed the masks first and foremost, they had to lie. But actually, that doesn't follow. Because that doesn't follow. That's just leading to a string of lies, because all you need to do is say, here's the situation. Masks are beneficial to the public, but we're actually, as a government, going to start hoarding up masks as much as we can and restricting sale of them because we need them for our healthcare workers. Two things can be true at once. We're just doing this, and but as time goes by, we're making them as quickly as we can and give a daily briefing on your progress. Right, that's all. And people would accept that. But that's how kind of these lies start. The other one is with, let's say, Paddy Cosgrave. I said I wouldn't talk too much about this pandemic, but here I am. Paddy Cosgrave said his thing about 4 nurses dying, which I think on balance is more likely to be true than not, because he seems to have pretty good sources. He's been right about a lot, and the press have been wrong about a lot, and the government lie a lot. So just on balance, I would say, without knowing for sure, I would just, if I were a betting man, I'd be willing to bet that he's probably right. And the way they denied it is that they weren't technically HSE or something like that, right? Give this a share around as well, lads, as well, if you can. It's not groundbreaking or anything, but why not? So anyway, Cosgrave, assuming he's right, let's just say, on the nurses thing, why would they lie about those nurses? Well, the lying about the nurses would be a consequence of, well, if 4 nurses have died and that becomes public and the rest of the healthcare workers find out about that, they could go into kind of not quite a mutiny, but into mutiny mood. A kind of what's the word? Not insubordination, not mutiny, but there's a word for it. It's not quite mutiny. It's when there's dissension. Dissension, I think that might be a word. Displeasure or whatever among the ranks, which isn't good for any kind of leadership. They don't want that. And so it's to stop, kind of try to stop this news getting out as much as possible, is a consequence of not wanting that. Because why would there be this uh, displeasedness? I can't think of this word. Unrest, whatever, among among the nurses, is because there's a PPE shortage and all of this. So the nurses could naturally say, well, it's not just, we don't mind contracting disease where there's nothing that can be done about it, insofar as that's kind of the the name of the game of our profession. That's what we're signed up to. But the fact that it might be unnecessary because of PPE shortages and all of this. So it's like one lie is designed to protect another shortcoming, and it becomes a kind of a chain. So, and you end up with this kind of dissension, I think is the word. Yeah, someone has just told me there. Thank you. But yeah, so these things kind of, when you think of like why the government are lying about one small thing or another, it's really in order. It's because you think, why lie about that? Why not just tell the truth on that one individual little thing? It's usually because one kind of little lie ties in with almost everything in a certain way, that once you start pulling at the thread a little bit, then the whole jumper comes apart, right? Or you start to see it all unravel, and it's whatever. So I think it's for broader reasons that they tell all of these small little unnecessary lies, and they have people like Fergal Bowers here who are willing to hash out the latest line from the HSE or the WHO any given day, and never kind of gives us a mea culpa on getting something wrong, does he? While calling us all thick for listening to rumors on WhatsApp. Anyway, I've made that point before. So this person here, and I hope you can hear this, I've had issues with audio recently, replied to Fergal Bowers here. Chief Medical Officer Tony Holohan talking about face masks recently. And by the way, it's not just the recent WHO news. There have been all sorts of studies and compilations of various studies and all of that to do with masks being effective. It's almost settled science, settled fact at this point. Masks are effective. They were denying it for a while. It was in flux for a while. Now it's like, listen, if you don't realize it at this point, then you need to listen to someone who isn't Fergal Bowers. And even he's saying it at this point. So it's accepted. Now let's look back a couple of weeks or a month and listen to what Tony had to say about it. Come on. Okay, yeah, that's annoying because it's like you're saying people don't need them. You're not saying we don't. We're not saying that you must have gloves and masks. He's saying we're actively not recommending these things. It's like, why don't you just say, hey, look, if you want to wear a mask and gloves, if it makes you feel better, and it might hear there was no sound. Is someone saying there's no sound? Because I know that was rather low, and I don't think that's my fault. It's just the way the way that video is, because it was low for me as well. You just couldn't hear it at all. Fucking hell, lads. Not your fault, like, but I keep doing this, and I've been making sure recently to share the audio. This kind of the someone suggesting a solution to it. I don't know. I really don't know what it is. I will try to figure it out. I hope we can get it together for this NASCAR video, because I do want to us to be able to listen to that. And if that doesn't work, I'll play it out loud like the old days. So that was that anyway. These arseholes, right? This is an interesting little story. It's not a big deal. This isn't like breaking news or anything. This is like how many, like, decades old now, but it's just an interesting little facet. Given that I was talking about China yesterday, I gave like a big mad monologue on China, pulled it out of my hole, and it was I don't know. I based on a documentary I saw, but So it's just interesting, this tension between when Africans got introduced to China throughout the 60s and 70s, and how this actually became the protests against this became a kind of a catalyst for the Tiananmen Square protests. Nobody knows about that. That's not something we ever heard about. And just the thing about Tiananmen Square is that is held up as a beacon of Western liberalism. It's the ultimate kind of color revolution, Western journalist on the ground reveling in the revolution happening around them, taking kind of vicarious pride as leaders get dragged out and hung, or like people stand in front of tanks and all this stuff, right? It's a whole like kind of role play kind of world that the West seems to love, or used to anyway, freeing other parts of the world and kind of standing, it's like people putting the flower in the gun of the riot police and all of this stuff. Nobody ever knows what the history was in these various different circumstances, who was actually the good guy, the bad guy, what was actually going on, even basically what was going on. People never really care to know. But the West just seems to love this imagery and stuff. And Tiananmen Square is one of the big ones on all of this stuff. And it turns out that this is kind of at its origin. I'm just going to read from here a bit. It's not very long. So the Nanjing anti-African protests were mass demonstrations and riots against Africans, which lasted from December 1988 to the following January. Animosity towards African students began in the 1960s, when scholarships provided by the Chinese government allowed many students from China-friendly African countries to study in Beijing. The policy was originally based on the idea of third world solidarity, and Mao Zedong's linking of the fight against American and Soviet imperialism with Marxist class war. Many of these African students were given larger educational grants than native Chinese students, and hostility towards the Africans was a regular occurrence. Most of these students returned to their home countries before reaching the end of their courses due to poor living conditions and uncertainties in the Mao era. So anyway, as well as resentment about the larger stipends given to African students, hostility from Chinese students towards Africans also flared up when there was contact between African men and Chinese women. Ooh. I'm just having a little chat. It's gone too. Chat's gone this time. But so it was the women thing, In an incident in Shanghai in 1979, African students were attacked after playing loud music and making sexual remarks to Chinese women. I can believe it. I can believe that it happened, as well as the attack. These clashes became more common during the 1980s and sometimes led to arrests and deportations of African students. Cultural difference in dating habits added to the tensions. So in December 24th, 1988, 2 male African students were entering the campus at Hohai University in Nanjing with 2 Chinese women. The occasion was at a Christmas Eve party. A quarrel between one of the Africans and a Chinese security guard, who had suspected that the woman the African students was trying to bring to the campus were prostitutes and refused their entry. It led to a brawl between the African and Chinese students on campus, which lasted till the morning, leaving 13 students injured. I am basically just reading a Wikipedia article to you, in case you were wondering. 300 Chinese students, spurred by false rumors that a Chinese man had been killed by Africans. I wonder, that's worth looking into, whether that was actually false or not. I guess we'll never quite know. That a Chinese man had been killed by the Africans, broke into and set about destroying the African dormitories, shouting slogans. Part of the destruction involved setting fire to the Africans' dormitory and locking them in. The president of the university had to order the fire department to take action. After the police had dispersed the Chinese students, many Africans fled to the railway station in order to gain safety at various African embassies. The authorities prevented the Africans from boarding the trains so as to question those involved in the brawl. Soon their numbers increased to 140, and other African and non-African foreign students, fearing violence or simply by sympathy, arrived at the first-class waiting room at the station, asking to be allowed to go to Beijing. So I think they're asking to kind of flee off to Beijing. So anyway, this is where it gets interesting. But by this time, Chinese students from the university had joined up with other students from other Nanjing universities to make up a 3,000-strong demonstration that called on Chinese government officials to prosecute the African students and reformed the system which gave foreigners more rights than the Chinese. On the evening of December 26th, the marchers converged on the railway station while holding banners calling for human rights and political reform. Chinese police managed to isolate the non-Chinese students from the marchers and moved them by force to a military guest house. They had to be taken to a military zone to protect them. In Yizheng, outside Nanjing, the protests were declared illegal, and riot police were brought in from surrounding provinces to pacify the demonstrators, which took several more days. The African students and their sympathizers were removed to Yizheng, to another military guest house closer to Nanjing on New Year's Eve, and were returned to their universities. Anyway, the aftermath. In January, 3 of the African students were deported for starting the brawl. The other students returned to the university and were required to follow new regulations, including a nighttime curfew, having to report to university authorities before leaving campus, and having no more than one Chinese girlfriend who visits would be limited to the lounge area. Okay, something like, I don't quite get that. So guests are still required to be registered. Anti-African demonstrations spread to other cities, so it basically caught on, right? The Nanjing protests were groundbreaking dissidents for China and went from solely expressing concern about alleged improprieties by African men to increasingly calling for democracy and human rights. They were paralleled by burgeoning demonstrations in other cities during that period between Nanjing and the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989, with some elements of the original protests that started in Nanjing still evident in Tiananmen Square protests of 1989. I think I'm going to do a little project on this. If anybody wants to send me on stuff, I'm always I always like a bit of help. But I'd be happy to throw an hour or two or whatever, maybe more, into just trying to comb through the details of this, because they say the original protest, this Wikipedia article says, some elements of the original protest that started were still evident in Tiananmen Square. So it's not like it completely pivoted to a totally different tenor or kind of feel. It actually still maintains that energy. It's just interesting. It's something we're not told about. It's worth, I'm a fan of revising history, just out of interest, Revising doesn't mean falsifying. It just means taking another look at it. Often it means actually getting to the truth of something, unraveling kind of false narratives and all of that. But someone is saying some crazy pictures from Tiananmen Square, brutal stuff. Actually, I never really dove into it. I've never known. All I really know is the tank and the guy standing in front of it and all that. Don't really know it beyond that. But these whatchamacallums, this background, the Nanjing protests were an interesting background to this. There's another one as well where related to kind of intersex relations, the kind of relationship between like the ethnic gender, what's the word, dimorphism, the men and women of a specific nationality coming together with those from another, and the kind of the problems that can come from that, obviously, right? There's another one where it was about dorm room, or no, it was about the study buddy. And it was this, from what I know from watching like the AVD guys in China and from a few friends who've been to China and hearing stories from them or whatever, is that much like a lot of parts of the world, you'll have these lads in their like early 20s will go to a certain part of the world, and where they might like do half okay with women at home, and they do they notice themselves doing strangely well when they get to wherever they are, whether it's Asia, Africa, whatever. And I'm not like condemning or condoning that or saying or being like smug about it or the opposite. I'm just saying it is what it is, right? And it's a well documented thing that you're beating off the kind of advances that are made or can be made in a place, for example, like China. Maybe slightly less so now, but that would have been, like I say, that would have been even more so in the past. And they had this thing called the I'm going to look for it now. It was like the study buddy China controversy, and I can see why, because for whatever reason these it might show up actually from the other article on the it does. for whatever reason, let's take China for example. At least until recently, Western lads would like do very well with Chinese women and get a lot of advances from them. Whatever the reason is for that, I don't know. Is it status? Is it a chance to leave, or a chance to this, or whatever it is, or just plain old, phenotypical, attraction or something? I don't know. Whatever it is, right? But when you set it up like that, and then with this issue here, there's a study buddy thing. The act of assigning study buddies for international students practiced by Shandong University has spurred extensive controversy in the Chinese media. As of 2016, this university has announced a study buddy program for international students. According to the announcement, the International Students Office would assign a Chinese study buddy for the international student. The Chinese study buddy is encouraged to engage in development of language skills as well as general activities with the international student. And so in 2018, the buddy program got an upgrade. One international student could have up to 3 Chinese study buddies. For those who applied to the buddy program, 141 of them were Chinese, mostly female. 47 were international. So you can see where this is going. And most of the ones who applied to be a buddy were women. Oh, Jesus, sheepdog. Anyway, just some chat going on there. So most of them were basically girls simping for these Western lads, I would imagine. And the chat, I can't, but so you could have this Western, Chad with 3 of these kind of temporary waifu study buddies, and I can see why the Chinese lads got annoyed by that, I suppose. It's one thing for it to be the case in the first place, but for the university and the kind of whatever to actively be like pimping out the situation is just too much to bear, So there was a kind of what was the aftermath? The international students in China has these Wikipedias, they're not fake. I look, well, like insofar as Wikipedia is real at all. There's something weird going on about these articles. They're like written so strangely in the present and past tense or whatever. The stories are real, the subject. Like the international students in China has been granted, I don't get it, extensive benefits for a long time, especially in terms of scholarships, and therefore the incident has sparked vast resentment among Chinese media. This feels like it was written by a Chinese person. The incident combined with another incident that involved assault of police, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I can't even read this. What does this say? In 2019, during an on-campus recruitment event, a speaker from Wanda made an improper comment that, quote, "The girls of Shandong University are beautiful. I indeed believe the foreign students are enjoying their lives here." Oof. Nobody wants to hear that, guys. So that's kind of insulting to the Chinese men there. What else have we got? So I don't know. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to look into Tiananmen Square in more detail, because you could say, why do you keep talking about China? China's in the news now. China needs to be talked about more. So if I keep coming back to it, it's no harm. So this next story here: farm sector planning to fly in 1,500 seasonal workers to save fruit and veg harvest. What does Wolfhound say here? Sorry, I'm just going to the chat here. To the chat. Knowing what we know, it probably was written by a Chinese person, Garrod. Yeah, I'm sure it was. Some of their, it's called the 50 Cent Club or something. It's you get 50 cent for like writing an article. It's kind of like a Chinese bot farm type thing where they get lots of people to join the online kind of fight and these various arguments. So anyway, the farm sector planning to fly in 1,500 seasonal workers to save the fruit and veg harvest. I mean, if this is practically necessary right now, then it just has to be done. But whatever happened to getting young fellas to do it? Yeah, by charter flight. Well, I'll look into the article now. I may as well just go through the actual details first. So chartered flights could be used to transport up to 1,500 seasonal workers into Ireland to pick fruit and vegetables through the summer and early autumn, with restricting. So it's like early summer, or somewhere in early autumn, so late summer, early autumn. And that means it's not immediate. If they needed to pick these vegetables now, like tomorrow, and if it was a choice between chartered flights or so much produce goes off, I would say, I don't like it, but yeah, fly them in. It's too late to kind of shoulda, coulda, woulda on this. Let's just do it. But it's like they're talking about late summer, early autumn. We've a few months away yet. And yet they can only resort to this option. It's insane. Why not just get, like I say, young fellas to do it? Why not get people why not try to pay a bit more? And again, the farmers, I suppose the farmers could say it actually is just rotten. This goes back to my discussion about China yesterday with the American factory, the conundrum you have in globalized economics. It's a fucking absolute disaster. And you end up with all these problems that this globalization thing brings to your doorstep. And then when you talk about the problems, the same people who brought them to your doorstep go, well, what can we do about it? It is the way it is. You can't get out. It's like, no, like we wouldn't have this problem if it wasn't for the wider issue of globalism. Like, so it depends on, okay, so a farmer, it would be handy if there were any farmers in the chat who can do at least a devil's advocate for this, then do feel free to let me know. But so you have a farmer who needs to bring in his, what are they? Romanian and Bulgarian. They would say, well, okay, one of my responses would be just pay people more and you'll get Irish people to do it. Just pay a few euro more. And yes, as Wolfhound says, lots of people laid off. There's loads of people would jump at the chance, right? Seriously, the idea that you just go to this easy option of bringing in a slave plane, a plane full of slaves to do it. Again, yeah, plenty of Irish people unemployed, plenty of students idle. And it's part of society that a cohesive society has the various strands to it. It's got various classes and roles and this and that, but part of a healthy society is that most people can say, when I was a certain age or at a certain point, I did this toiling summer work. Trust me, I know what it is to work. Most people like to be able to say that, and it's not this, this whole thing of being like, oh, people with their tippy-tappy computers, that's not real work. I've done real work where you sweat and, long days and all this. There's something healthy for even for a while just to have engaged in that. And yet Irish kids now are zombifying themselves on I sound like such an old man, on their PlayStation, on their computer games. I've nothing against gaming, but it's not the gaming. It's the fact that just there's this kind of aimlessness, and it's not their fault. If you could say, hey, if you work for a few weeks or whatever at this place, they're long days, it's grueling, it's all that, but actually you make a nice bit off it at the end if you don't spend, for an 18-year-old, that could be good. So, and we can't do that. Okay, so the argument, I'm going to look at the chat to see if anyone's given me any arguments in the response to this. But if you were to say pay a few euro more if you can't get people, and then go for it, and then you'll get your people. And if that's not enough, you need to pay more. And if that's not enough, you need to pay some more. And, oh, well, I don't have that much to pay. It's like, well, then the price of the produce needs to go up. And they would go, well, it can't go up because it can't compete with foreign produce, which can be produced cheaper, which can come into Ireland. And again, we're back to the lack of protectionism. It's like, well, in that case, we need protectionism, obviously, right? But they're like, no, they want to go the absolute other direction. Let's go with no protectionism. Let's compete with this foreign cheap produce because of cheap labor. And I lost my train of thought. Someone did text me and I kind of looked at it. It's, it basically, you can't compete with that. So you basically integrate it into your own system. You can't compete with the cheap stuff from abroad. So you import abroad, basically. You import that labor force from abroad to here, to our own detriment, effectively, in several different ways. And what's the point of doing that long run? And what's the moral stance for anyone who wants to defend that? What's the moral argument for that? Oh, well, I thought, like, what is that going to be? A left-wing argument? Cheap labor, a kind of an underclass, a class that you can literally like fly in a plane to do this like donkey work and then send them home. It's awful. If the price needs to go up, the price goes up, whatever. Again, this is just a complete argument for why protectionism makes sense. And I don't know, there has to be another way. We need some big brain economisty people to think about this stuff. There has to be a way to be able to trade internationally in certain ways where it makes sense, but also be rather protectionist on lots and lots of different stuff. I mean, that's the way it was for a long time before globalism got its hooks in. So I suppose it's been done. It's not like there was a time where people didn't trade anything with each other. You trade where you need to and all of that, where it makes sense. But in crucial ways, it's basically the principle of trade and of economy comes second to your own people's interests in having a definition of what your people are. You kind of then can weigh the former against the latter and the well-being of your country and of your local environment, both socially and environmentally and everything, just comes above the other one. And that would be in a situation, you know what it compares to actually? It's like what I would almost compare to, I have a lot of jumpers on for right now. Too many, but you know, we're here now. So it's almost like the view of a democracy as a in charge of a military, like democratic leadership of a military. So you elect politicians and a government, and they have control over the military. You don't have a military dictatorship. And so the opposite of that, having a military dictatorship would be the opposite of a democratically led army. And it's kind of like that with economics in our societies, is that if you think about the economy as an institution, almost like the army as an institution, where we've gone from the economy being under civilian control, I mean, that is not the case anymore. The economy, we live in an economic dictatorship, effectively, in the same way as you could have a military junta, a military takeover or coup, or military government. We have that with the economy writ large, where it is in charge of the country and its interests come before the country, and the country just follows in after it. And then you end up with farcical situations like this, where any normal society would go, okay, we have 1,500 workers, if you can call that, if that's a way of measuring it. We have 1,500 workers worth of stuff to be picked. So you would just, I mean, again, what would happen if you just said, all right, farmers, all right, everyone, we can't, and that's why I always say it to left-wingers who are like, okay, like left-wingers who are willing to listen to me, or kind of whatever you want to call them, lefties, when they say, you know, okay, you've got a point, I'm not going to call you racist or whatever, but at the same time, why do you focus on immigration so much? If you claim you care about the economy, or you care about the country in ways that are outside of the whole immigration debate, why do you return to immigration so much? They're kind of like, I accept that you want to talk about it, well, why come back to it so much? And I'm like, I come back to it not out of some kind of bigotry or anything. I come back to it because it is one of the quickest kind of silver bullet ways, even from kind of a left-wing point of view, to undermine the hegemony and the power of this global capitalism, finance capital, globalization, all this stuff. It's one of the biggest, because it's such a behemoth. You can't take it down by the shoulders. You have to kind of like put a dagger through its Achilles tendon. You have to do something clever like that, something small, but that will bring it down. And you look at these small things and you go, what could they be? And I see the immigration, stopping immigration, as in like throttling immigration based on a popular mandate, as that kind of Achilles tendon, a kind of a little way, a hand trip for the entire blundering kind of trundling kind of giant, big massive prop of a giant, to bring it down, because you cut off that labor thing, you cut off that fluid pool of labor, and they have to, it doesn't mean that everything gets better magically, it just means that they have to operate within certain constraints that aren't about what you write on a piece of paper or laws or regulations. It's none of that. It's just there's only so much labor. What are you going to do? So naturally, things have to change from that. I think a natural result of that would be you would have to kind of introduce, even if you didn't want to, once you had stopped the immigration, you'd have to say, okay, we have to do a bit of protectionism then, because as a result, we have to pay farmers more, price goes up, we can't compete with this like cabbage from fucking Nepal or whatever it happens to be, right? So therefore, we have to just stop the cabbage from Nepal. So yeah, all of the effects would kind of ripple out from controlling this labor pool, I believe. And again, you would avoid farcical situations like this in the middle of a pandemic where no one can move and it's all crazy and we're all housebound and everything. Nobody's doing anything. And, you're flying in charter flights of 1,500 people. That's insane. Again, you limit the labor pool, you limit immigration, and you're left in a situation that it's not a catch-22. It's easy at that point. You just say, okay, how do we fix this farm issue? Okay, bit of protectionism, bring it in bit by bit, and then just like has been done time immemorial, if you need people to pick these crops, then you start going around the street handing out flyers, incentivizing, just whatever you need to do, just pull work onto the farm. Go, listen, just do this, incentivize it. And that economics meant to be a simple relationship that way. You incentivize people the appropriate amount, they will come on and do it. Shouldn't be that hard. And yet we're stuck in this nonsense. I just want to see the chat because I did ask for people to give their opinion. So this is actually worth a look. So I'm going to go through this. How far back do I need to go? So AB says foreign workers will put up and shut up every employer's wet dream. Exactly. I saw a tweet earlier, someone, probably a Leo bot, right, saying, oh, these foreign workers don't need training or mollycoddling or this. We're back to the American factory story I talked about yesterday. They don't need this. They're just in and out. So they're probably like strong men. They're they just keep their mouths shut. They've been on many picks before, whatever the word is, right? I've been on many a picking season before. They've probably done a lot of it. So they know the drill. They know the story. You watch this at the end of the day. You do this. You know how to physically pick things because there can be a knack to these things. All the rigmarole of it. And then you're given kind of quarters to sleep in or wherever you sleep. And you just get into bed at night and you fall asleep. And there'd be no complaining out of you, right? Whereas if you were to hire Irish, they'd be all full of demands and this and that. Well, it's like, yes, that's what we tried to progress to, a situation where you have a decent set of conditions when you work. It's really frustrating how, like, you do not have a left wing here. Like, there's no, of all the left wing NGOs who come out trying to make my life difficult and others, and kind of just all of these NGOs, I don't hear any of them stepping in and going, hey, we don't want this. We don't want to bring in a bunch of like Bulgarians to exploit them in a farm, right? Let's step in here. I actually lost where I was at. I'm back at where just bear with me there now. Okay, so we're in China. Cheap immigrant labor. That was a good point that one made. They will put up or shut up. Someone says the younger generation is addicted to gadgets. Again, yeah, but you know what? I think a lot of them, if you paid them enough, I mean, maybe that's a factor, but it's like if you paid people enough, if you paid people a wage where it's like, hey, if you do this, you can get a car out of it at the end or whatever the compensation might be, and it was a good enough offer. That's what it was in the past. I mean, I suppose you could say the welfare states. I don't know. This is a complicated thing, but like, I do think adequate compensation, people would do it. So I'm back to where I was. So, someone did work experience in a factory, was fairly toiling stuff. But again, that's the problem, is that they're not paid right. Whatever happened to the supporting the working people? Like, so it is toiling. It's tough work, right? All of this stuff, abattoirs, apparently they're hiring loads of Brazilians in abattoirs, because I can accept it's hard to get Irish people to do it. But again, compensate them enough. There's plenty money made from the proceeds from abattoirs, as in from the ultimate product at the end of a piece of beef, right? And we know the farmers don't get much. We know Tesco's or whatever takes the lion's share of proceeds. So, like, why not just say, okay, you have people working for the government who do, whatever, and they get paid 70,000. All sorts of bureaucrats get big wages, and you have the people in the kind of what would you call it? The kind of professional world, the kind of corporate world, who, they're not doing. They might say, "Oh, well, I'm really smart and I'm really efficient," or something like that, because the status gets into people's heads. When people are kind of middle class, upper middle class, they start to feel like they deserve it. So they start to justify their position. They're like, well, I don't work in McDonald's and earn as little as them because anybody can work in McDonald's, whereas my job is, it's like all of these justifications that do come in for the middle class. But ultimately, what's harder, working some kind of professional kind of middle job, or working in an abattoir? I mean, I don't care when people talk about skills or low skill and all. The fact is, one is harder than the other, and one you would have to pay me more for than the other. So why don't we just say, fine, foreigners won't work in abattoirs and these factories that are really difficult, really toiling stuff, and then we're left with no factory, society on the brink of breakdown. It would naturally force, this is just, I'm theorizing here, it would naturally force a reorientation, just like the pandemic has. A reorientation and a review of what actually is important and what actually is essential in our economy and our society. You would go, we need these cows slaughtered, we need these crops picked, and the people in the professional positions would are the consumers of these things. So you would reorient where money goes and where it swims. So instead of just it being like you get paid fuck all as this kind of donkey worker, and other people who just kind of sit around kind of half the day kind of in these kind of corporate jobs and bureaucratic government jobs and stuff, there would be a reorienting of value. And it's simple as that to me. If it's backbreaking, toiling stuff, then and people aren't getting paid adequately for it, no, they should be driving around in the fancy car as well then. And I don't know, maybe there's an argument to be like, well, the world can't afford that. The world just can't. Be realistic, Garrow. The world can't afford that. But it's like, well, why can't we have? We have all this technological efficiency. We have more billionaires. We have more productivity has gone through the roof. Why can't we have a situation where, for one, we automate these really awful jobs, and for two, insofar as we can't and humans do it, pay them handsomely. But no, once you have that option where you can always downgrade to that cheap mule labor from abroad, and I don't mean that in an insulting way, but that's the way it's treated, then we're always going to be in the kind of Charles Dickens territory. My goal would be to move away from that. But in order to do that, you have to box in the conditions. You have to kind of, I don't know, in order to move forward like that, think of it like a sports thing, like you're playing a game or hurling or football or something. You draw the lines of the pitch and you go, there's 4 corners, there's 2 goals, and we play within that. But when you have this kind of, there's a line missing in the pitch and one side can just go running off out that way, you need that coherence, or else you can't progress, I would say. And progression, most people would agree that progress in the sense of creating a better world, call it utopian if you want, would be a future where, hey, the factory worker, the person who does the job that we all would go, God, I wouldn't like to be doing that, naturally deserves to get paid handsomely. You see him go by in a really nice car, fancy guy. You go, oh, he does that hard fucking work. But no, it's just it is a kind of a continuation and a perpetuation of a kind of slave dynamic, basically. And industry is very reluctant to kind of surrender its slave or peasant class kind of dynamic, and I despise that just inherently. So what else have we got? And what power so Lenentre says, and what power do these foreign workers have compared to those that hire them? they're so powerless. Again, I'm so against this. Like, their employment is what keeps them here, placing immense power in the business owners instead of labor. Absolutely. Um, so make protectionist agro union with Celtic states. Yeah, I don't know what you would do, but again, any move you make, you would just decide, okay, who are we representing here? Who are the group that is being represented? And you decide, you say it's Ireland, or you say it's whatever. Yeah, but you ideally Ireland, right? You say it's Ireland, and then you work from there. Every decision that gets made, is this in the majority of Irish people's interest or not? And you go yes, no, and you go through that process wisely as you go. Um, GDP goes up, communities are destroyed. Yes, and as GDP goes up, and you might get a raise as you go, but your living expenses will exceed that as you go. So you're constantly being shrunken in while the GDP goes up. That's the lesson. GDP isn't for you. That really, or me. Um, Yeah, old Labour would definitely be against foreign workers. Yeah, old Labour, like whether it's British or just the general Labour movement, were completely against. Karl Marx was against importing Irish workers into Britain. Um, um, a farmer in my town used locals in the 1980s and 1990s to pick veg for his wholesale veg business. It was income for virtually quarter of secondary school going children and others, unemployed men. Yeah, unemployed men at a loose end, kind of disconnected from society, a little bit disconnected from the activity and the participation in the kind of community or group, to say, hey, we'll give you a nice few bucks here. There's a nice handy job going. The entry requirements aren't credentialism based or any of that, but there's a decent paying job here. It's not complicated. Come on in, right? It's not easy, but come on in. You don't have people being reached out to like that in a society where it's like, well, no, unless you want to do it cheaper than this Bulgarian guy who keeps his mouth shut and sleeps in like a bunk bed or something, then so it destroys that element of the hand up and the opportunity for all sorts of people, I think. In 2004, this is the same Sean Mack. Yeah, he says, speaking about the same farmer, then in 2004 he replaced all the locals with cheap Eastern European labor. It's scummy, but again, the government would have created a kind of situation where it was in his best interest to do that, and they shouldn't. I don't quite blame. I do blame people individually, but you set up a certain set of rules, and people will follow them in their own self-interest. Government matters here. Their policy should constrain this kind of stuff. You're always going to have gum beans. Gum beans are going to gum bean, Um, Also, more expensive labor would encourage farmers to invest in technology to make workers more productive. JD says, good point. Um, yeah, it's incredible. Anyway, there's too much chat here for me to read out even. But it's so bothersome. So let's read it a little bit more. So, with travel restrictions in place across the EU due to the COVID-19 pandemic, fruit and vegetable growers have been in touch with government to secure clearance for workers to enter the country. We have people here, for Christ's sake. The vast majority of pickers who work on Irish farms each year come from Romania and Bulgaria. However, with only a restricted schedule of commercial flights now available to these countries, the possibility of chartering aeroplanes to bring in the workers is being considered. Unreal, that's unreal. Yeah, that's basically that. What's our next story here? I'll kind of finish up here soon. The Gardaí interview Irish citizen over 15 million international COVID-19 scam. Gardaí have intervened in interviewed an Irish citizen in Roscommon related to the suspected laundering of 1.5 million. Sorry, it says 15 there. The case involves a German company with offices in blah blah blah. Wait, is this the Nigerian guy? I should really check this. Let's see, because I can just give you the TLDR on this. I may have picked out the wrong story. Anyway, there was oh, it is the Nigerian. Yeah, okay. Sean Mack is telling me it is this guy. I just sometimes I kind of being live and stuff. I just can't kind of go silent and read, so I can't focus. So therefore I can't pull out the bit I want to. But this is funny. I do a video with you, and then on the chat you tell me what it's all about. But basically this kind of scam, and the real story here is we all know there's scams going on, right? But this kind of RT, the Journal, and all of these people calling them, and the Irishman, the this and the that, it's like, come on, man. The scam was running through Lagos and all of this. Like, if he's so Irish, then, you know, why does it involve Lagos crime cartels and stuff? The guy's not Irish, right? He's paper Irish at best. So anyway, the Kyle Larson story, I kind of got a little whiff of it last night, and I didn't read into it too much, but I want to figure it out with you here. This NASCAR driver, basically, what I do know, because I looked up the video because I was curious, is he was live streaming a like car racing game, like a PC game, and he said the N word on his stream, and from what I could hear, he was saying it in the way like a nasty. Yeah, okay, sorry, chat distracted me again, but he was he basically said it in such a way like say you crash your car, you do whatever, and you say bollocks. He said it in that way. It's not like he was addressing people directly or anything like that. He just said it as like, think of a rude word in your mind, a kind of a derogatory rude word. I can think of a few. The C word, whatever, right? You go for the worst word, right? And that's the gaming thing, basically, is the whole N thing, right? And I just chat, but that's basically it. And it's just so strange to me how this is like a massive controversy. It's so tiring at a certain point. You just go, this is so fake and it's so stupid. Like, I have absolutely no. Someone here says the gamer word. Yeah, it's like it's so weird to see adults en masse collectively pretending to be like offended and pearl clutching about this thing. It's like, seriously, like in reality, like drop the face here for a second. Does anybody care? Not really. It's like, we are deeply hurt and offended. It's like, no, you're not. Come on. But so what happened according to this article by whatever they're called, NASCAR Infinity Series driver. I know nothing about NASCAR, by the way. It looks very boring. Why are they talking about Connor Daly? Oh, what? That's a different guy who did the same thing. Okay, let's go back to the main guy, Kyle Larson here. So, can you hear that? Give me you can hear it. Please tell me you can hear this.
An awful thing to say, and I feel very sorry for my family, my friends, my partners, the NASCAR community, and especially the African American community. You know, I understand the damage is probably unrepairable. And
good, you can hear it. Delighted. I knew it wasn't just my whole thing in general. Okay, I'm going to start it again. So he gave his apology, but then he got torn to shreds even more afterwards. And as someone on Twitter said, you know, this has been studied. It's actually, I don't know where, but apparently anyway, it's been studied. And even if it hasn't, I know this to be true inherently, that apologizing makes it worse. And people who actually refuse to apologize, and they don't even make a big deal about refusing, but they just go whatever. They do better. They become more popular. You become more popular if you just don't apologize. The other thing that annoys me is, like, I looked up his net worth, and his net worth is like 12 million. Now, you never know how these online estimates, but it's apparently like 12 million or something like that. Now, you could invest some of that money. He could get a job as, like, you know, because he's a big name, or he could open a big garage and a car company, and you know what I mean? He's a big name. He's got talent. He knows cars, everything else. It's not like he'd be stuck for decent work for the rest of his life, a decent, good job, right? And he's got 12 million in his back pocket, or probably more. I don't get how people don't have a bit of honor on this kind of stuff. Like, you know, clearly he's a gamer. Clearly he's like, he he's like, he understands a bit of that gamer culture, that kind of irreverent mentality. And it's like what, surely if you have millions and millions and millions and access to good jobs down the line, you would just say, you know what, piss off, fuck you. I don't apologize. I was gaming and I was having fun and I don't apologize. Whatever. It's just a word. It's just a joke, right? It's so frustrating that a guy like this would castrate himself in front of everybody when he actually has money. It got me as well with like George Hook, for example. Like he had such a long career and all of this, and he came out a little bit on the groveling side and slowly got kind of fired after he made his comments about not wanting people to get raped, which somehow was controversial. And I just thought, listen, you have lots of money, you're pushing on. Why don't you just go to them? Like, why? I could understand someone who's like hanging on by a thread and their life depends on it. They need this little job they have or whatever. It's like, you're in a position to do it. Please help us here. Like, just tell them to fuck off. And the fact that they don't is just grim. Like this groveling apology. And on top of that, it makes it worse anyway. So it's lose-lose.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm sorry. Last night I made a mistake and said the word that should never, ever be said. And there's no excuse for that. I wasn't raised that way. It's just an awful thing to say. And I feel very sorry for my family, my friends, my partners, the NASCAR community, and especially the African American community. I understand the damage is probably unrepairable, and
the damage is unrepairable. Oh my God. And what they always do, all of these people, when they grovel, they say, and some people, the worst are the people who offer them kind of, instead of condemning them completely, they'll go, I think you are sincere in your apology and it's going to be a long road back. But I think if this idea that there's a road of kind of perdition, or I don't really know what that word means, but this kind of road of redemption, shall we say. So like a road of redemption, this kind of long road of redemption where you'd do sensitivity training and this and that and this and that. And eventually years later, you kind of meekly, you can race again, because you've made amends. It's like, what the fuck is this about? Sorry for my language, but this is so stupid. Why wouldn't you just bow out and go, see ya? And become a kind of folk hero then, basically, because you're like, yeah, I'm going to live my life. I do not bend the knee, on another day, I bet someone like him would be rootin' tootin' with his guns for his freedom, give me freedom or give me death. And here he is like groveling while he's a millionaire.
I own up to that. But I just wanted to let you all know how sorry I am. And, I hope everybody is staying safe during these crazy times. Thank you.
I'm just looking at chat here. Someone says, how old are you? I don't think you're asking me. I'm 61. So just look young, So the comments are worth having a look. Like, yeah, people just reveling it. People like, bullshit, you don't mean it. And they're right. He doesn't mean it. It's like, so yeah, you don't mean it. So they'd ultimately respect you more if you just said, hey, I'm not apologizing because I don't feel sorry. And I don't think you care either. Someone's saying, it came out naturally. No way this isn't a word you'd use often, reading his mind, the N-word. And it's like, this kind of psychoanalyzing the word. It's unreal. And especially from the African American community in America have like kind of, and it's not them in general, it's this kind of leadership, this kind of like community leader people, just complete fake nonsense. Like, oh, you used it this way and this and that. We know you say it often. We know you say it, this magic word. It's like, who cares? It's actually nauseating. Someone says, not sure how it can be a mistake. You drop that so casually. It's obvious you use it on a regular basis. I mean, what? It's not like he's going around a plantation, like whipping people. It's like he's gaming and he probably says like a vast variety of words that are very bad and very rude, that a lot of us probably say, like F words and B and C and whatever words, right? Um, and that's it. Like, and whatever. Nobody, like, people live private lives, and they understand that you say, like, oh, that's a bad thing, and it's just a kind of funny. Would rather you own up to the poor decision of having it in your vocabulary. So he should say, I'm sorry I let it enter my vocabulary. Oh, so grim. The way you said it so easily without hesitation, you definitely say it a lot. Don't hide it. We know who you really are. It's like, it's the blackmail. And these people can only act in this way towards this guy because they're empowered to do it, and they enjoy the kind of feeding frenzy. And it's like, I'm just so sick of it. And the only way to beat a feeding frenzy and a kind of a mob is to just say, listen, you actually have no power over me, ultimately. Unless you want to kill me. And if you want to do that too, right? Go ahead, and just have a complete bold face towards it. And it goes away. Maybe he won't drive NASCAR, but he'll continue his life. Like, if you need to prostrate yourself to, like, drive a car around in circles, it's just silly. Yeah, just never apologize. Never apologize, ever. Apologize if you feel like you've done something wrong on your own terms. Like, if you privately think, like, there are times to apologize sincerely, but it's like, otherwise just say, nah, lads, you don't own me. So I might leave it there. It was a kind of wide ranging, kind of all over the place, slightly stream tonight, but I did it, and that's what matters. What time have we? Oh, it's midnight, lads. So yeah, basically, thanks for watching. I might try to get a few interviews going soon enough. Hopefully I have one lined up. I haven't got it confirmed, but maybe for tomorrow. And I don't want to give the subject away because it would kind of give the guest away as well. But it could be a very interesting one. And I'm currently reading, by the way, I'm reading Submission by Michelle Welbeck, which I will be doing a stream, or a kind of a review stream on, with a few guests, at least one anyway, guest. And I'm actually thoroughly enjoying the book. I thought I might be a bit disappointed in it, but it's really, really, really good. I don't want to start talking about it in detail because I'll ruin the reviewer discussion. But yeah, I am enjoying it. So there's that. I might try to focus on getting a few interviews going and get a few specific topics going as well to research. But while you're doing that, you end up, I kind of end up, while you're trying to organize, like, structured things, the nights still go by, days go by, and you have to come on. And so that's what these streams are, right? You just take the news. Chopper is saying do another 90 minutes. What I would love to do, but apparently I had people give out to me about this originally. I'm going to stay on and actually talk. I'm leaning back now. This is my post-stream sit. I started out, I kind of did a few streams where I did like 2 hours. I just went on and on for a while. This one has probably gone on quite a bit too, but I'd go on and I'd just kind of peruse things and whatever. And I had a few people narked at me in the chat, like, you need to, I just want a short video. It's almost like people are aggrieved that you tricked them into watching a long video or something, when it's like the time is stated on the video anyway, like, whatever. People were kind of saying they want, it's like, I'd rather like bite-sized videos. I think they would be far more effective in all of this stuff. And without being contemptuous of audience, I'm kind of going, well, if you want that, just go like watch something else, right? I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's for the time that's in it. I kind of enjoy it, but then someone else pointed out to me, there's like the Twitch model, which the Twitch model doesn't necessarily need to be on Twitch. You can do the Twitch model any platform, here included YouTube, which the Twitch model is like people go on and stream for like 7-8 hours. They just basically, what it is more, I think, is almost like you go online, like if there's a day where you're, or an evening or whatever, where you're not doing much, and you know, those days where you might just go online basically all day, just kind of browse stuff, watch a bit of this, watch a bit of that. And it's basically like you're doing that, but you're mic'd up, you're earphoned up, and you're streaming. And I actually really, so I like that model. I like that interneting together type of thing. And for it to be an extended period of time where there can be dead air for a while. You can go off and like use the loo, make tea, come back, whatever. And it's just like, that's just the expectation you're at. So it's a bit weird if you kind of do something a bit like that and someone comes in complaining that it's not a 6-minute video. You're kind of going, well, it's maybe not the format I'm going for. Yeah, Sean Mack is saying gamers spend 8, 10, 12 hours. But you know, at times like this, I don't know, I think it's enjoyable. It's enjoyable for me. And I also kind of think, listen, I'm not trying to make these streams masterpieces or like viral, like explanatory propagandistic content for the masses to red pill all the normies. I'm not really like that. If I was trying to do that, I would just do something different. I would do that, but I'm not doing that. And I don't know, I kind of enjoy that format, because if I'm going to be online anyway, going through various things, like let's say I'm probably going to go to bed in a little bit here, but if I were to just stay online and kind of do a bit of after stream, kind of just checking out what's going on, it's almost like, why bother do that? Why not just stay live in the first place? Some music. That all said, I am going to sign off now. There's some music I found recently, because I do like to leave you with some music, and I took a screenshot of so I'm going to look it up. So this is what I'm talking about, where we do the casual kind of a method here. I'm going to link it in the chat. Oh God, it's in French. How hipstery I am. What it is, it just kind of came on at random for me one day, and it's Chop is telling me to be at Twitter at 2 a.m. I do check it, and I do. The other problem I have, which is really bad, is that if I wake up at night, I sometimes kind of grab my phone and look at it, and that turns into like 5 minutes, and it's probably a bad habit. Kind of waking up twice throughout the night and like looking at your phone, it's not healthy. But you know, oh, there's my flask. So this music is basically almost caricature level French restaurant accordion and type of thing. Or it reminds me of some kind of almost Disney film where there's like two like anthropomorphic cats or something running around Paris to this kind of jazz music, but it's very nice, accordion based. So I'm going to put that in the chat for you to look at afterwards. And then I probably will leave it there. Although I am tempted to stay on, but I'm tired as well. There's always tomorrow night. So have a listen of that. Cleanse the palate from me. And I will talk to you tomorrow night. Thanks for watching. See you.